All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're digging into a really fascinating analysis, one that asks a pretty explosive question. Is there a high-stakes, behind-the-scenes coup happening right now inside the Republican Party? Let's break it all down.
So really, everything we're about to talk about comes back to this one single question. All the political infighting we're seeing play out on the news, is it just random drama, or is it actually part of a secret, coordinated plan? We're going to look at the evidence piece by piece.
Okay, first things first, we've got to get our heads around a key idea from this analysis. It's called controlled demolition. Now, this isn't about just, causing chaos for the sake of it. Think of it more like a calculated plan to tear something down, but in a very, very specific way. So you can control exactly how it falls and then build something new from the rubble. Just keep that idea in your back pocket as we go through this.
So you gotta ask, right? What could possibly motivate a plan this drastic? Well, the first part of this analysis says it all boils down to a single, pretty stark, and frankly, kind of terrifying political reality that the party is facing.
28. This one number is supposedly what's keeping Republican strategists up at night. Because according to this analysis, that's how many House seats the party is projected to lose in the 2026 midterms. And look, that's not just a bad day at the office, that's a potential wipeout. We're talking about an event that could hand total control of Congress back to the Democrats for a long, long time.
And if you think that number sounds a little high, well, history actually shows it's pretty believable. There's this thing called the midterm curse, and it's a really powerful force in politics. I mean, check this out. In 20 of the last 22 midterm elections, the party holding the White House lost seats in the House. It's almost like a law of political physics. And look, if the historical trend wasn't scary enough, the analysis points to the November 2025 elections as the moment this all stopped being a theory and became a very real problem. Those Democratic wins all over the country, they were like the canary in the coal mine. It was a huge signal that the 2026 wipeout forecast wasn't just possible, it was likely. So, boom, the motive for a drastic plan, it's now crystal clear.
Okay, so if the motive is pure political survival, what's the weapon? I mean, how could any group possibly pull off a plan like this against a leader as popular with his base as Donald Trump?
Right, because a typical scandal just isn't going to cut it. The MAGA base has shown time and time again that they can look past indictments, controversies, you name it. So the weapon had to be something different, something more precise that couldn't just be brushed off as another witch hunt.
And this theory suggests the weapon is what it calls an ideological poison pill. The Epstein scandal is supposedly the perfect tool for this. And why is that? Well, because it's not just an attack on the man himself. It's an attack on the entire drain the swamp promise that the whole MAGA movement was built on. It's a direct shot at the brand.
This quote here from Ro Khanna, a Democrat, by the way, really nails why this is so potent. That promise to expose it all was absolutely central to Trump's appeal. So any failure to deliver on that, especially with something as explosive as the Epstein files, well, that's not just a policy mistake. That's seen as a fundamental betrayal, a broken promise right to his core supporters.
So, okay, we've got the motive and we've got the supposed weapon. But is there any proof that this plan is actually in motion? Well, the analysis says yes, and it calls what's happening the MAGA Civil War.
And what makes this whole thing so significant is who is supposedly leading the charge. We're not talking about the usual critics or the never-Trumpers. No, the public attacks are coming from some of his most vocal, once super loyal supporters. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Nancy Mace. That makes this an internal fight, which, as you know, is always way more dangerous.
And this isn't some quiet fight happening behind closed doors. Not at all. Here you have President Trump's own words publicly declaring war on one of his former top allies. He's even promising to end her career. This is the moment, according to the analysis, that the whole thing just exploded out into the open.
And then Greene's response. According to this theory, this is the real masterstroke. She immediately connects his attack directly to the Epstein files. She frames it not as just some personal fight, but as proof that he's part of a cover-up. And that line, "I don't worship or serve Donald Trump," well, that's basically a declaration of ideological independence, and it's aimed squarely at his base.
Which brings us to the succession plan. I mean, if the goal is to get rid of the king, who's going to take the throne? This analysis lays out a pretty sophisticated two-pronged strategy, with two very different people playing key roles.
And this is where the strategy gets really clever, because you've got two key players with totally different jobs. On one side, you have Marjorie Taylor Greene as the insurgent. She's the knife, basically doing the dirty work. She's the one openly feuding with Trump, and she's even signing a discharge petition, which is a pretty rare move to force a vote, just to keep the pressure on. Then on the other side, you have Vice President J.D. Vance playing the loyalist. He's staying out of the mess, defending the administration, and playing the long game. So the theory goes, Green creates all the chaos, which then clears a path for Vance to step in later as the stable, reasonable successor who can unite everybody.
So what's the endgame here? What's the ultimate goal of all this? The analysis argues that the final play is to actually sacrifice the 2026 election, to lose on purpose in order to set up the perfect political story for 2028. And honestly, this is a classic move. It's a playbook that's been used in politics for ages. You intentionally lose the 2026 midterms, right? That gives the new Republican leader a perfect enemy. For the next 2 years, they can just blame the Democratic Congress for everything, every problem, every failure, all the gridlock. And then, come 2028, they get to ride in and campaign as the only one who can fix the mess, a mess they secretly helped create.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together. We've talked about the motive, the weapon, the key players, and the endgame. So the final big question is this. Are we looking at a coordinated, thought-out plan, or is this just a bunch of logical but totally unplanned political events all happening at once?
Now, it's really important to stress that the building blocks of this theory, they're based on things we can all see. The terrible 2026 forecast for the party? That's real. The feud between Trump and Green? It's happening right out in public. The different roles Vance and Green are playing? You can observe that for yourself. All the pieces of the puzzle are right there on the board.
This is where we have to take a bit of a leap. The events themselves are real, no doubt, but the big question is there a puppet master? Is there some hidden hand, a group of strategists in a back room, actually pulling all the strings and making this happen? That's the part that's impossible to prove.
But the analysis does offer up a pretty compelling piece of circumstantial evidence, and that's the existence of Project 2025. I mean, think about it. That's this massive, incredibly detailed, coordinated effort to plan out a future conservative government. It proves at the very least that an organization capable of this exact kind of ruthless, long-term strategic planning already exists and is active.
And so that leaves us right back where we started, with the big question. After looking at the motive, the weapon, and all the players involved, is this whole thing just a wild conspiracy theory? Or are we all sitting here, watching the slow, deliberate, public execution of one of the boldest political plans in modern history? I'll leave that one for you to decide.